member for the great work that they have accomplished with what has always been a very delicate piece of legislation. Their staffs have been tireless on both sides at trying to work out differences, and we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for their commitment to this legislation. Let me say to the chair and the ranking member, I plan to go on for some time. If I were you, I would take the opportunity to leave for a while, because I will go for an hour or two or maybe three. And it's not all going to pertain specifically to this legislation, but I've got a lot to say, because I've heard some of the opening statements, and I've heard statements like our goal was to finish before the Supreme Court. Well, I got a question. Why? Why did a crucial piece of legislation that affects so many Americans and ultimately so many patients around the world, why did it have to be done before the Supreme Court? I'm not sure that anybody can give an answer, but somebody started that as a goal, and it just sort of was adopted. And I heard that the legislation was accomplished at record speed. I don't see that as something to herald. I mean, speed is indicative of something that we rushed our way through. And I know, on behalf of the chairman's staff and the ranking member staff, they've been working on this a long time. So has my staff. But from a standpoint of when we marked up the legislation, we came to the floor, how fast we went through the floor, we did it because there was an understanding that we were going to try to hold the Senate product together. Now, I don't want to take issue with the numbers. I had 2 amendments that were dropped in conference, so I'm not sure how I had 12 and got 11, but that's irregardless. The question that we're here to do, the purpose of this legislation, is that this is supposed to drive innovation in America and bring life-saving drugs, devices, and biologics to patients here in America first, but around the country, around the world. And that's the goal behind this legislation. And I've got to take issue with my ranking member. I don't think the 80% rule applies to health care. I can't look at a patient and say, well, if we can get 80% of the right policy, I'm going to feel good. If I'm in the 20% that's left out, I'm going to be really pissed off. One of the reasons that our health care costs are so high today is that we've been able to innovate as a country to where we maintain disease extremely well. But we're right on the cusp of being able to cure things like breast cancer, diabetes. It's not going to be cheap. It's not going to be fast. You're not going to find it in the 80% category. You're going to find it in the 20% category. It's going to take a while. It's going to take people invest in capital and companies that are committed to their shareholders that they're not going to have the returns because they're investing on something important, and that's the long-term future of this country and our country's health. That's what I see in a 5-year PDUFA bill. You know, this is not a 1-year reauthorization of something. And granted, this is not a piece of legislation that this committee drafted from scratch. It's important that everybody understands that this legislation are the negotiations between drugs, devices, biologics, generics industry with the Food and Drug Administration. There's not a member of Congress and no staff of Congress in the room as they negotiate what fees they're going to pay to the FDA to actually process their applications. So the focus of this committee was to look at what happened in the negotiations and try to figure out, how could we make this bill better? How could we assure ourselves that there was a level of transparency that we could understand that the negotiations they had entered into, in fact, benefited American patients? If this doesn't benefit the health care cost and the health care of Americans, then we've missed the mark. So the whole objective is to put America in a better position after the passage of this bill. Now, Mr. President, I'll be boring, because some of what I'm going to talk about, a lot of people in this institution know. But I'm not sure that the American people understand the background that's here. The Food and Drug Administration is responsible for assuring the safety and the efficacy and the security of human and animal medical products. One element of FDA's statutory mission is to promote the public health, and the FDA accomplishes this mission in part by timely approving life-saving, life-enhancing innovations that make medicine safer, more effective, and in many cases, more affordable. FDA's broad regulatory authority crosses a range of products and has resulted in the agency overseeing products that amount for 25 cents of every dollar of the U.S. economy. Let me say that again. The FDA regulation extends to 25 cents of every dollar spent in the U.S. economy. Therefore, the FDA's review and decision process does not only impact our nation's patients and innovators, their work has a significant impact on many sectors of our nation's economy. As consumers and patients, the American people have serious interest in ensuring that the FDA is accountable, transparent, efficient, and making sound decisions in a timely fashion as possible. You see, that's why I'm on the floor today. If the goal is to have transparent, efficient, sound decisions in a timely fashion, you don't rush through it. You make sure that there's a matrix in place, not one that was designed by the agency, and not one that was designed by the industry, but one that's designed by the body that's responsible to do oversight over federal agencies, the Congress of the United States, the Help Committee. It's our job. That's why concerns about timeliness and predictability of FDA's regulatory process must be taken seriously, and they must be addressed. Unfortunately, too often Congress is guilty of not paying close enough attention to how well things are working or not working. At the FDA, on behalf of patients, the very people for whom the most is at stake. Every 5 years, drug and device industries negotiate their user fees that are then sent to Congress with the expectation that we will quickly act upon to ensure the continuity at the agency. And let me assure you, this year is no exception. They dropped these agreements on Congress's lap and said, would you pass these as quickly as you can with no changes? And to their credit, the chair and the ranking member said, no, Congress has a role to play. And staffs had tremendous input at what the final product was. Unfortunately, rushing the bills through the House and the Senate has resulted in bipartisan track and trace provisions not being included in the bill we have before us today. Now, as the ranking member said, I'm very disappointed that these important bipartisan provisions were sacrificed at the expense of speed. I understand the difficulty of the lift. I acknowledge that to my colleagues and to their staff. But I also question how hard we really tried on an issue that we knew going in was tough. There's no such thing as spending too much time when it comes to getting something as important as drug distribution security right. And I want to assure all my colleagues that my friend from Colorado, Senator Bennett, and I will continue to work together to get these important provisions done. And I might add, I've had the commitment from the chair and the ranking member to work with us on other legislation to try to address this. But let me say today, it won't be any easier then than it was right now. It may be tougher then because this was a vehicle that had to go. Therefore, people would have swallowed a lot more than's in this bill. As my colleagues know, FDA and industry